Old Age Security, or OAS, one of Canada's pension programs. We have lots of conversations around it, but what really is it? And how do you qualify? What are some details around it? And some considerations with strategies and wealth planning. I'm Chris Horn, Wealth Advisor at the Andrews Group Asante Capital Management, and today I've got Reid Palmer, our Associate Financial Planner, joining me. We're doing a little bit of a different video with more of a Q&A style session. I want to preface by saying that there's no real golden rule or specific thing that everybody should be doing with OAS, so we're going to keep this video a little bit more higher level. We'll talk some generalities and some general strategies around it, but it is going to be a bit higher level. So with that, Reid, why don't you give us a little bit? We have lots of conversations with clients, like what is OAS, when to take it, all this type of stuff. But why don't you give us just some general thoughts to start?
Yeah, Chris, for sure. So as you mentioned, Old Age Security is one of Canada's primary pension programs. There's really available to individuals aged 65 and older. There's really one primary requirement to be eligible for Old Age Security, and it's all based on your residency as a Canadian, as an adult. So if you've lived in Canada, you have to live in Canada to be eligible for even a partial amount of Old Age Security. You must have lived in Canada as an adult for a minimum of 10 years.
Okay.
To be fully eligible, you need to live in Canada for 40 years or more, between 18 and 65. So really the only way to qualify is to be a Canadian resident. Yeah. If you've lived in Canada your whole life, you can expect the full amount. There's a calculation if you haven't lived in Canada your whole life, but we won't get into kind of the details and nuances today on that.
Yeah. So just for the purposes of this video, let's assume somebody's been here their whole life and they qualify for the full amount. What does that look like for somebody?
Yeah, so if you qualify for the full amount and you turn 65 in this year, you'd expect to receive roughly $735 a month if you're between the ages of 65 and 74. If you're a bit older and you start taking it, you'd expect to receive around $808 per month in 2025. Yeah. One of the nice features about Old Age Security is it's indexed to inflation. So depending on your age and what year you started taking it, those two numbers I just stated may differ a little bit.
Right, yeah. Another kind of planning conversation we often have is, should I defer OAS or should I take it right at 65? What's your thought on that question?
Yeah, it's a super common topic, common conversation with clients, and really something to consider for sure for all clients. There's really four primary reasons that we discuss. There could be others, but these are kind of the primary ones that we'll talk about today. So number one would be health and longevity. If you've got longevity in the family, if you're in really good health, and you expect to live kind of into your 90s or your 80s or your 90s, deferring can be pretty appealing. Number two would be cash flow. So if you're still working at 65, or you've got plenty of income coming in from other sources and you don't really need the Old Age Security income, deferring can make sense. Number three would be the assets that you've accumulated. And similar to number two, if you've got other assets, maybe in RRSPs or RIFs, maybe in open taxable accounts, and you can fund your lifestyle with other sources of income, sometimes it can make sense to defer. And then lastly, again, somewhat related to number three, would be maybe we might be doing some more advanced tax planning, potentially triggering income from RIFs. Maybe there are capital gains that are being triggered as part of your drawdown strategy. So really there are situations where it can make sense to defer to maintain a bit more flexibility in your planning in your late 60s. Partially because of OAS clawback reasons as well.
Right. Yeah. Why would somebody want to take it right at 65 then?
Yeah, the short answer to take it right at 65 is really kind of the opposite of the reasons why you would want to defer. So maybe you've got pretty poor longevity, family genetics, or maybe you're having personal health challenges yourself and maybe you expect your life expectancy to be a bit lower. Or maybe you just need the cash flow right now. You don't necessarily have as much income to draw from retirement accounts and things like that. Those would be the primary reasons to take it at 65, is there's a cash flow need or an income need. And maybe health is not looking great and you just want to collect it
Yeah. So let's just go back to the deferral part for a second. What does that look like? Like calculation wise or whatever,
Yeah.
what does deferring actually look like practically for somebody?
Yeah, so the appealing part of deferring is that you're actually financially incentivized to defer. So what that means is every year that you defer past 65, up to the age of 70, you'd be looking at a 7.2% increase in your old age security payment. So if you defer from 65 and you take it at 70 instead, you kind of defer all the 5 years. There's no sense in deferring beyond 70 because that 7.2% ends at 70. If you defer all the way up to 70, you're looking at about a 36% increase in your monthly old age security, which would then continue for the duration of your life. So mathematically, it can be appealing if those other factors line up well and it makes sense to do so.
Yeah, and sometimes too, it's not necessarily a bad thing taking it at 65 either, right?
Yeah.
There is a bit of that incentive. When we talk about kind of the tax planning, let's say, around it, right? There's something called the OAS clawback. What is that?
Yeah. So the OAS clawback is formally known as the OAS recovery tax, and really what it is it's important to recognize that old age security is an income tested benefit. So what that means is if your net income, so your income after deductions and any deductions applied, if your net income is above a certain threshold, then you could be exposed to the OAS recovery tax, which is 15% for every dollar of net income above a threshold, which in 2025 is $93,454, I believe, just slightly above 93 grand. So how that works is if your net income is around that threshold, and what the 15% tax rate means is basically if you have a net income of 151 to 157K, you're likely to have all of your OAS clawed back. And what that means is that come tax time in April, it would basically go back on your tax return and become tax payable, and you may actually lose some of your old age security benefits in the following year because the government has deemed, okay, your net income is too high to collect OAS. One thing that we're very cautious of with clients, and we always recommend around their 63, 64, an important consideration with OAS is that if you want to defer it, potentially for the reasons we've already discussed, you actually have to basically apply to defer it. Now that's opposite to CPP.
That's right.
So CPP, you have to apply to begin receiving it at 65 or whenever you want to receive it. Old age security, you actually have to take action to defer it. If you don't do anything, you'll just start receiving it at 65. So that's something we always remind clients about when they're kind of approaching that age where it becomes a relevant consideration.
And I think too, when it comes to OAS clawback, it's not when we're planning. Let's say a client is taking it, and we're doing some income planning and stuff like that. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have it clawed back. We just plan extra around it, right? To say, you know what, need to put a little bit of funds aside to cover that, or send you a little extra per month for this next coming year just to cover the lack of OAS potentially, right? So it's more just something to be aware of than a big detriment when it comes to tax planning.
Absolutely. I like to joke with clients that old age security clawback is a good problem to have. Right. Because it basically means that your income is high enough, and it's generally a good problem to have.
For
But
sure.
it's absolutely something we want to be cognizant of, and if we're around that threshold, we definitely want to be mindful of what income we're triggering in that context. So,
for sure. Yeah. One other question we sometimes get is the longevity of OAS, being that it's government funded, all that type of stuff. Any comments on that?
Yeah, it's definitely a good consideration. So, like you said, old age security, unlike CPP, it's directly funded through government tax revenues. So, as we know, it's very difficult to predict government policy, whether tomorrow or 20, 30, 40 years down the road. So, because it's not a contributory plan like CPP is, the sustainability and the long-term nature of it is a bit more questionable, you could say, because it's really at the whim of government policy, right? Now, that being said, it would be pretty politically unpopular to just completely axe it. But what may be more likely is, some tweaks around the edges to potentially improve the long-term sustainability of it. But in terms of that question, it's really difficult to say, super hard to predict.
Yeah.
For now, we just kind of go with it and assume it's going to continue.
Yeah. Just like we can't predict markets, we can't predict what the government is going to do with policy 5, 10, 15 years down the road, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on OAS? I know, like I said, I wanted to keep this higher level, but any final thoughts on anything?
No, I think like most financial planning decisions, everyone's situation is different. Everyone's situation is unique. You mentioned earlier, there's really no golden rule. We want to consider your situation with clients. We always look at what's relevant in your situation, what makes sense in your situation. So if you're curious about it, you want to chat further, we're happy to discuss, but really should be viewed in the lens of your own situation, not in a broad rule of thumb or anything like that.
Totally agree. Yeah. Thanks, Reid. Appreciate it. So that's it for now. We'll catch you in the next video. If you do have any questions specifically about OAS and your situation, feel free to reach out to our office. Thanks everybody for watching.
Thanks, Chris.